the Sound Designers Podcast. Here are your hosts, Timothy and Renee.
Welcome to Tonebenders. My name is Renee Coronado, and with me today it's Tim Muirhead and Teresa Morrow. Hey, how are you two?
Good, hi.
I'm doing great.
So super excited for the interview that we have today. I missed out on it, but the two of you went and interviewed Oscar and BAFTA winners Bernard Gariépy Strobl and Sylvain Bellemare, who worked on Denis Villeneuve's Arrival.
Yes.
That is as much French as I can get out of my mouth at one time.
Well, get ready for some French accents because they're coming at you in this episode. But yeah, Teresa and I recently went to Montreal and hung out with these guys at the studio, the mix stage where they mix the majority of Arrival. And they told us a lot of awesome stories that you're about to hear about the film and gave us a tour of the place. And it was pretty awesome. It was a great day.
Yeah, very generous guys with their time too. So we appreciate that.
So just to set it up, what was Bernard and Sylvain's role on the film?
Bernard was the re-recording mix engineer. And interestingly enough, that film started with two mixers. And then the other mixer, Luc Boudria, his father got ill and he had to leave. So Bernard had to mix the last 2/3 of the film all on his own when it was originally intended to be a two-man mix. So that was a pretty interesting turn of events for him. And then Sylvain Bellemare is the supervising sound editor on the film.
Nice.
Sylvain gesticulates insanely while he speaks, so you'll hear him going on and off mic. We had him laved, but he's looking over here, he's looking over there, and then his hands are covering the mic, he's smashing his chest. There's quite a lot of editing done to get this under control, but it makes him to be a great storyteller, and he's really engaging to listen to. And Bernard, it was also super engaging as well, but in an entirely different way. They kind of are the yin and yang of each other. It was really interesting to watch the way they interacted together. Yeah, so we started the interview by asking them, with all the success Arrival had and all the awards it won, how has that changed their perspective on sound and their life in general?
Let's take a listen.
I think, yeah, in a way, of course. It's nice that when the films are shown. I did great films that nobody saw, so it's a bit frustrating sometimes. I think it's good. It didn't change for abroad, but here, the local thing, it changed. Something changed with all those nominations because Arrival we had a lot of success in different festivals. We had 7 nominations and 5 prizes over those 7 nominations. And also we had the different awards from smaller awards, but I think for me, they're really, really important. Like
the awards from sound groups, everywhere. The AMPS is the equivalent of the MPSC of England and UK, and so they awarded us the prize also. So the way I see the success that we had on that, it's finally opening up to the talent that's here from everybody in Montreal, because we all learn from different people. I mean, nobody's self-made here. We all learn from different people, and we learn from each other with all the sound crew in Montreal. There's no one here in Montreal from whom I cannot say I didn't learn anything. I think the whole community was very proud of that, because we can say that in a certain way, everybody helped in this being created. Not everybody worked on the project, but like I said, just by working together and talking to, and this is kind of an opening of what has been happening here for decades, and it kind of opened up to the whole world. But I felt very proud of everybody in Montreal, and yes, of course, my father, but many more artists with whom I still work. We all work with them, and it's.
There's also one thing we have to mention. We say Montreal, but Arrival, the main team was from Montreal, but it was an entire collaboration with 3 other countries. So it's very important to mention them. First of all, Alan Mulray and Thomas Anik in Los Angeles, who produced a lot of different military sound for the film. The Foley team in Paris with Nicolas Becker, who was the Foley artist on Gravity, which is one of the most important Foley artist design that ever been done. And I think the first violin of our orchestra was a couple from New Zealand, Wellington, New Zealand, Michelle Child and Dave Whitehead, who were the master behind the heptapod voices. So Montreal, yes, but we were really had big colleagues that were coming from huge industry. Dave has a huge experience into those kind of films, and without Dave's skills and Dave's experience, things would have been different. And to mention again and again, one of the masterpieces that helped the sound to be a success in Arrival was the music by Johan Johansson. It was one of the best score you ever can get for a sound design, because sound design, to be good in a film, need good music. In a way, Johan produced the bass line on many scenes, and the sound was able to go with the music. And to go again, we have to mention Joe Walker, the editor, who did all the music editing, and also had designed few effects, or more like specific effects. So
he worked with sound in his editing. He worked in ways to allow sound to be part of the story in the film, and you can do good sound, but it's so much easier when it's planned in the film, when sound is part of the thought of the way the story is told. And in that sense, Joe is a...
He had a good experience. He went to music, to university, so he's very good in music editing. So, and he really, few scenes were totally composed by different tracks from Johan. So really the people, Bernard and I, we really were like the leaders of everything. So I'm not, but my goodness, and Dave Whitehead and Michel in Wellington did something fabulous. So that's why it's Montreal, yes, but with a lot of, without them it would have been impossible.
But when I was talking about Montreal earlier, it was not specifically about the six, it was more of what Arrival brought to Montreal more than what Montreal brought to Arrival. And I think Montreal is part of Arrival, of course, but Arrival was an important part of sound in Montreal. And that was my main topic when I was mentioning about the impact that it had. It's more of what Arrival brought to Montreal. It's like in everything, it's a teamwork. It's a little frustrating sometimes to be pointed as names on a list, because there's so many people without whom it would not have been possible, and Arrival is a...
I was happy when I went on the stage for the Oscar to mention that, because it's really a team effort.
And the Oscar goes to... Arrival, Sylvain Bellemare.
This is the first Oscar nomination for Sylvain Bellemare.
So they say take a deep breath. So this award by far is a collective award made by people from many countries around the world, led by the Quebec team. Salut Montreal. And I want to say thanks to Gaspard, Clémence, Catherine, all the cast and the crew from Arrival. Amy Adams, you're a wonderful person and a profound actress. Thanks a lot. Denis Villeneuve, Denis, où es-tu? I love you so much. You bring love to us. All we need is love. Good night.
And sometimes people are really focused on themselves. When you go to the Oscars, they talk about their mom, their dad, and everything. And it's like they were alone. I mean, it's no, not at all. On every part of the crew, it's like that. You're a hairdresser. There's a lot of hairdressers on the film, but you hairdresser. So it's like, it's an entire collaboration, and this the way we work. I think the Sound of Arrival, we wanted to do something that was more delicate, that we can see on the main Hollywood sound market, I will say. I have a huge respect for all the community in LA, but there's a certain tendency in Hollywood film to really push the volume always over to the top. And we really didn't want to do that in Arrival. Bernard went for a screening in Los Angeles of different films. And can you talk about that as an example, when all the films were playing for like 5 minutes and we had the lowest film in volume? Or?
Well, it's the sound inspection of the Samuel Goldwyn Theater, which is happening every year. it's an evolution of the sound bake-off that was and still is happening in different ways every year. And it was very intimidating because I didn't even know that thing was happening or even existed. And a very good friend of mine, Gary Bourgeois in Los Angeles, just wrote to me, I know you didn't receive that invitation because you're not part of the academy, but you have to go there. And so at the last minute, I wrote to people and I was invited there. And I actually walked up the steps going there with Mark Mangini, not knowing that I was with Mark Mangini at this moment. And we spoke. And he was just like the day before he got the job for Blade Runner. So it was an interesting conversation. He sat right on the side of me. And I was being surrounded with all the best in Hollywood. And I had my small 8-minute clip. And it was very interesting, and happily it went very well, but
Which clip did you
Yeah,
use?
that was the hardest thing ever I had to do.
We had a lot of conversation.
A lot of conversation about what clip to choose, and Arrival. There's so many great sound scenes, but the rhythm of it made those scenes quite long inside an 8-minute clip, and I really wanted it there to be some good dialogue, some heptapods. How can you show a clip for Arrival for sound without having any heptapods there, and music moments? So I went for a little kind of short story inside the film, which was the bomb scene where they go back and the soldiers had planted a bomb in the place that blows up, and then they keep talking afterwards, and the heptapods are moving away from the earth.
So you get a little bit of explosion in
you
there
get a little explosion,
for LA's sake.
Well, yeah, that was also something, because it was definitely not maybe the it's not an intergalactic explosion or like a planet explosion like Star Wars had or stuff like that. And but still, it's just a dynamite explosion that wasn't in there. But I thought, for sound, it had most of everything, even if it's maybe not my preferred scene or our preferred clip of the film. Anyway, it was nice, but it was really interesting to see how it played compared to everything else that was brought in, and fantastic job from all those different sound crews everywhere. But it did have a different sound in a way, and I was still very proud of how it played. But I can assure you, when Mark just nudged me on my shoulder before the clip started, I was kind of one of the most nervous playback I had in my life. But it played out very well, and the rest of the story.
I think we have some maybe specific questions about the mix or
yes.
Or
let's
stuff.
go into geeky stuff.
Into the nitty-gritty.
Let's get down and dirty. So one thing that I noticed when I watched the film is that basically from the point when Amy Adams' character gets to the shell or the spaceship headquarters, the tents outside, throughout the rest of the film, when she's in the show, there are constantly voices going on in the background in the forms of radio chatter and the communications and their headpieces. Was that all scripted, or did you guys build that as you went?
Yeah, not scripted, but it was really, that was one of the main goals of the sound that we wanted to achieve, but it wasn't script, no. I mean, on the script, no. But it was script for the sound, I will say.
How did you go about managing just that raw amount of content?
It was very exciting to do so. And the main concept was to show that they are in a very high-pressure moment. The fact that, of course, you're military, you never get in contact with ET every day. So it's sort of how are we going to deal with it? So Denis was a bit worried about the fact that we need to feel the tension all the time without showing, because he didn't have the budget to see like big action outside the military site. So we need to feel the tension. But of course, we're still on the base. So military are people who are really trained to behave like, sort of being calm and something. They're not panicking. They're not starting to run all over the place. So I'm happy that you mentioned that, because not a lot of people mention that. There was a lot of different level of communication. Some communication we did ADR for it. Some communication we took in different sound libraries. Some communication we had from other projects. It was a mix of a lot of different things. And not only the voice of communication, but also all the device communication. We did a lot of smaller sound and a certain specific moment. And I remember a fantastic scene when Louise Banks wake up after a dream, and it's like if there's a device that like beep too much in the background that wake her up. So yeah, it was one of the subtle sound design thing that was around the film. Yes.
You know, in some scenes it became kind of such a background noise that you could, removing it just made an effect. If you didn't have that, then you can't create the silence in the same way. So it became a material to create tension and to create contrast, and also a tool to create some silence sometimes. But sound-wise, it's something that's very dynamic in a way that you can bring it in, out, and whether you understand it or not, but it can be like background chatter or it can be specific voices. It was a material just to add color to as a palette of sounds in it to create emotions or tensions. And
I don't know, I could see somebody taking that idea and like just creating kind of like a sort of like almost a trashy track that is background noise, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like all of the communication is pertinent to the story, even if you don't really necessarily understand what is being said.
No.
That's always the goal. Make it useful, purposeful to the story. Yeah, it was used in many different ways everywhere. Specifically, when the first scene when they go out to the spaceship, there's this chatter always happening, and the way it plays in and out, and when they actually rise up to the ship, you can go quiet with it, and then just start. But it's never really disturbing because you feel that it's always part of what is happening there. So you're not, it's not pulling you away from what is happening. It's part of what is happening. But why does it start there? Why does it stop there? Why all of these things? And there's even those were all Sylvain's ideas and that he came up with. And there's actually one character who was completely invented in sound post-production, part of the team that is of the team that is going up. Didn't exist at all in the script. But the fact that he's dictating and communicating back to the base everything that's happening is also an interesting idea, because there's always someone here that can talk and create this communication between the two of them.
And we had the languages also. The fact that there is device communication, voice communication, but with a lot of different languages. Of course, they are in communication with all the 11 other sites in the world. So of course we see all the screens and everything. There are certain scenes that are obviously to show that. So we had to do in New York a huge session with different Darren Fink. I'm sorry Dan Fink, sorry Dan for this, was in charge of all this. So we had to, of course, New York was a better place than Montreal to do so, to get the Pakistanis and different languages that were not easy to get. One of the things, we mentioned that few often, but a lot of communication between all the soldiers and the crew in the shell, in their hazmat suit, with the base. We did a huge complex recording because we're in an American film with money. We wanted to do something more like, let's say, like organic. So we took all the lines, some production sounds, some ADR, and we passed through those lines through walkie-talkie. So we basically send the sound into a full-range speaker. The sound came out of the speaker, go to the receiver send it to a transmitter in the other room. The transmitter was projecting the sound through a microphone. So we did that for so many lines.
And many different devices, different type of speakers to have some options. And then we sampled each of these things, we sampled them as impulse responses in Altiverb, and with all sorts, to be able to change those lines in final mix later on. And it worked. It was a lot of effort, but I mean, it worked when we got line changes. It was all well labeled, and we knew which device we were using for that specific line, and so we had all those inactive tracks in the Pro Tools session, each with their own presets and of harmonics and impulse response, EQ and compressors and everything to match what was recorded, and we just had to drop it there, commit using the Pro Tools command commit to easily get a bounce of it, and then reinserted it and it matched. And it was a lot of work, but it gave colors that we would not have necessarily would have aimed for using only the presets that were available in plugins. And of course, it was just a way of hearing how those things sounds in many different ways. And there's this is to mention also the fantastic work of Claude Lahaye, production sound mixer of the film. The helicopter scene where they talk, where Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, the two characters, meet in the helicopter, is all production sound from the real helicopter communication tool that Claude Lahaye chipped in.
And we tried to do something different, but never worked.
we tried to either mix, the boom to it and
no, we kept
and you can hear all sorts of buzz and things happening, which is from the real thing. But then we also wanted Foley, one time Jeremy Renner just bends down and gets his papers out, and so we recreated kind of a sound of what it would have sound like if it had gone through this microphone. But that was another way of using readily available, real sounding things instead of recreating. It works, let's keep it. Why reinvent stuff if it exists?
And it's also interesting because all those communication bring the concept of the voice, the fact that the first emotions come with the actors, and one of the things come with the voice, and the voice will always remain such a cool thing to hear. So as soon as you take the voice into a device, whatever is it, organic or real device or plugins, the emotion can go to so many directions, and it's on every film it's like that. So in Arrival was such a cool things to do, and it wasn't that complicated. As soon as you get the voice transformed, you just bring your fader in, and then there's an emotion right away. And it's, I'm always touched by that. One of the most important films in history of sound design is The Conversation by Coppola in the 70s. And it's only about that. It's why this film really shocked the people on such a good way. It's like all those voices are going through devices. When the first scene on The Conversation, I think there is a Witch Square in New York, but that you see those characters and you see like this microphone trying to reach them. And you hear all those voices. Oh my goodness! How do you start a film? So it's coming back to a very old culture of just voices, and it's just beautiful, So.
I mentioned impulse response and altiverb, but to go more on the geeky side of things, when Louise Banks first, the character Louise Banks first comes out of the tent to go meet she's overwhelmed. They are all overwhelmed. She's a university teacher, and then it suddenly becomes in the middle of an army base and going to meet aliens. And she's wearing this huge orange suit with breathing apparatus and stuff, and surrounded by helicopters. So it's completely overwhelming, and we really wanted to get that feeling out. And the French Foley team did some great impulse response of the hazmat suit, the actual hazmat suit. And so what we did for that scene is we mixed it as if it would have been a full mix, straight, standard perspective. And I just put some altiverbs on the main master of everything, and just went wet dry into those things. So the whole sound of it just sounded as if you're in this bubble, and with having the breathing, her breathing really up front, you really kind of have this claustrophobic, completely blurred vision, and that's also visually what we get from her POV sometimes, and blurred sound of what's happening around her, and that tool was amazing to create this kind of sound effect using the whole mix of the whole track, just blending it completely, messing it up completely, using that.
It was really exciting.
It was really fun.
Just a cool moment. And that wasn't, I think, one of the most important things we've done with the film, and Denis was happy in a second with that. And just that the camera, just turned like this, and there is no specific, it's not that obvious that you can do something like that. And we did it, and it was like, then he was happy in a second, so it was a great moment.
You're talking about how the music was composed somewhere else by a different team, and the shells were designed by one person, and the Foley is done by another person, and so you kind of your job is to corral all this material into one place. And the one thing that I was thinking about when I watched the film was like how, especially in a science fiction movie, I guess, low end plays such an important part of the experience of the film. Because I found, like, even though there was all the different elements, they blend together so well. And we talked about this in another conversation about how the music and the sound effects sort of streams like come together, and at a certain point you're not really sure which one is which, but you still have a very distinct sense of like that's the sonic profile of the music and that's the sonic profile, and it doesn't get muddy. And that's kind of, I'm like, how do you do that? That's the kind of thing that kind of seems like a big challenge.
Yes, it is. It's part of the mixing challenge to make sure that nobody steps on each other's feet, and that everybody say what they have to say clearly and felt and understood in that way. So that's part of the challenge. But I think Sylvain and I worked a lot in making sure that, let's say, the helicopter scene when they arrive to the camp, there was some work needed there specifically for this reason, because music was in a frequency range that was similar to what the helicopters were. So we had to work in making sure that the music was not blurred out and that we still had a feeling of the helicopter without just having to push the helicopter louder. So it's a sculpting work in frequency ranges and trying to make sure that everybody complements each other in it. I think it's mostly a feeling and listening and trying to understand what part of the sound is actually the useful part of it and what is not necessary in this sound. No point in adding bass if there's already huge bass in the music. And the opposite is true. Sometimes if something needs to happen, if the ship starts moving and the wonderful sounds of rocks and tumbling rocks, and it had to be felt in every way, then adding music on top of that might have blurred the little details that made that sound so powerful. And so sometimes music has to give, sometimes the effects have to give, but hopefully everybody works together and we get to play everything in a way that everything is being complemented. But it's a very, very fine line into what comes out in the mix as the main emotional lead in a certain moment. And this drive from the base to the spaceship, the whole thing is a up and down, slightly up, slightly down. Just the effects that I was talking about, the altiverb thing, you have to get out of it at some point. How do you get out of it without hearing whoosh, and just, and that's like going into some Foley sound, just putting up a Foley sound and music and something and just covering up, a shift in something, and then you go back into another music line. But the Johansson's music was absolutely wonderful for it, because it was not this constant thing. It had pulses. So in between those pulses, you can do whatever you wanted. It gives room for everybody to speak and not step on top of each other.
Yeah, and I think that's a common complaint about score, is that it's it kind of wallpapers over everything, and it ignores the aspect of timing that gives each element its particular moment.
Because it wasn't an orchestral music, so it was different. It was more like a vibration, ancient, pagan music, sort of using weird instruments. So, but to go back, I'm really happy with your question, because personally, Bernard and I, we did a lot of film together, and I think for me, when I try to do films, in a way, I think I'm going back to a fantastic statement by Quincy Jones, who used to say, if you want to have a hit, you need to see your spectrum analyzer full. And I'm always like that, to try, okay, how can we make sure that all the frequency that exists in the world can be shown in the scene? And of course, it doesn't work like that, but like the heptapod, for instance, with Dave, Dave really used the low end for the heptapod. Of course, they're big and fat, and the low end was very important for the heptapod. So one of the challenges was the heptapod, what were talking while they were sending the ink to the glass mirror. So of course, one of the base thing is to say, okay, they're gonna use the low hand, so the ink does have to sound different. So we were trying to make all those range different. So, I mean, those things happen on every films, but it's the same with dialogue sometimes. I mean, that's the challenge of every mix. But those things were, okay, we knew that everybody has his place. And what I really like, I'm really happy with the result, is that at the end of the day, the heptapod take their voices like as loud, but the ink is there. And the ink was so complicated to do. It doesn't look like that, doesn't sound like that. The sound is so simple. But my goodness, the step we had that started in Paris, transformed in Montreal, coming from different sources, I think 10 people work on that ink. And it was so simple. There is nothing in that thing, they're so particular. So Mimi Allard, one a very good friend, and who was the FX editor during the mix, she worked like for 3 weeks all over the time.
Because she had to match the VFX changes all the time.
Because of course, and there's certain scene there's at the end when Louise Banks is with Costello, forget, or what?
Whatever.
So it's like freaking all over the game, all over the place. So there's like there is ink all over the place. So it had to all those snitches all over the place. So it's the goal of every film to make sure that you have a nice range of all over the place. But yeah, it's coming back to an orchestra. When you going to a stage to listen to 100 musicians play at the same times, it's been one of the quests of all the great composers of the 19th centuries and everything. How can I make that fit perfect? And it's you really they dig their head. They try to.
It's one task of mixing that I find very interesting is making sure that the best of every idea is being brought out, and sometimes you have to shave off whatever is not necessary to make sure that you're not just piling up stuff one over the other and clogging everything up. And this is how you get eventually to have a clear sound of and you get the best of everything out because everyone is contributing in the best way they can and not hissing or booming away some other stuff. And it's like I said, it's a sculpture thing, and it's finding each the way of for each thing to be playing the best they can.
You see that in certain war films. Like we had a huge example, Hacksaw Ridge, with Kevin O'Connell and Bob McKenzie, his name, I forgot his name. They got the MPSC award and they got the mix for the Oscars. And there's certain battle scene, everything is in details. You hear everything. You hear the bullet at this time, the punches at this time, this little thing there, and it's a fantastic collection of that. That's an amazing work.
It doesn't come natural.
Oh, there's hours and hours and hours. And how can you make like 10,000 sound at the same time and have being out there? First of all, their frequency spot, but also their location spot on the screen, because you're still playing, okay, I'm gonna have a sound here, a sound there, a sound there, and it's fantastic. It's architectures. It's architecture. This is one of the beauty with, I would like to do a big war movie one day, like bullets everywhere. I'm not
because we made a lot of quiet films together also before.
But having this, and I'm not necessarily a fan of Hacksaw Ridge as a film, but I was tremendously shocked about what the work they did with sound, how to place everything in such a detail.
There were fantastic soundtracks,
and we had a good time with them also.
There were fantastic soundtracks last year of all sorts, and it's always fun to meet and hear stuff. Deepwater Horizon had this build up from destroying place, build up for an hour long. How much destruction can you get from sound? And I listened to that on an airplane. I was not even enjoying the full dynamic thing, but you could feel everything, and that's also part of sound sculpture and creating things and toying with the frequency and dynamics and everything. It's
scene when
fun.
the station, when the platform, we'll say, will explode. Just before that, when we see all the change of the explosion from water. I mean, this is Harry Cohen and Willie Stateman. They're fantastic guys, and I really like them. Wally was talking about when he did Kill Bill about how he had every sword had different sound. You know, it was like they're fantastic to listen.
Let's not talk about specific sounds for a second, and maybe let's just talk about kind of the overall process. What was the schedule like on this film? Did you guys get on it really early in the process?
It's complicated because Dave started way before us. Dave Whitehead and Michel Chal way before us. But we started on February 1st, and the mix was supposed to be April 1st. Oh boy. But finally, we mixed a bit, but we started mixing at the end of April.
Second week of April, something like that, we started pre-dubbing.
So it was super crazy, super nuts. I was like nervous 24/7. I thought it's gonna be so dangerous to do that, and for the first time doing a film like that, having such a small period of time. But fortunately, Dave was started way before. And we had a lot of sound from LA, from Alan Murray. But still, it was like crazy. We had to be. It was a crazy schedule.
And there were some key parts that were absolutely all to be created. Everything related to the spaceship was to be created from scratch. There were no bases for this. So there was some naturalistic basis that was there, and the heptapods were there. But the heptapods' voices only were there, so the rest of it, everything, all the sound design
it was massive, and also to bring all this together to make it as a piece, and it was our first experience. Like for me, it was the first time that I was only a sound supervisor. I always do sound design, effects editing, at the same time of being a supervisor. But of course, when you work on a $1 million, $2 million Canadian dollar film, we're not talking about a 50 million US film. So and so it was, for me, was the first time that I had to do this, conductor, making things together, and also there's a lot of people to talk to. Everybody has also his own ego into this, and it's normal. So it's complicated to say to somebody, okay, you have to do it like this, not like this. I know that you like this part, but it's not the way we have to do it. So it was like, for me was, my goodness, I think I lost so many pounds in it. The summer after that, I was totally smashed. So.
And what was the schedule on the mix stage?
It started off well and ended up more complicated. We started off pre-dubbing in 2 different stages. With also offsetted timelines, so that Joe Walker, the picture editor, could be partly in the dialogue pre-dubs, and then be partly with the effects pre-dubs that I was doing in different stage. And so we spent good like 8 days maybe in pre-dubbing in 2 different stages, and then we got to final. Denis and Joe at the beginning of the final were not available. They were screening the films, test screening the films in LA. So we were 2 mixers on the project, and after a week of final mixing, nobody had heard what we had done yet. My colleague Luc Boudria unfortunately had to leave the show for personal reasons. And then it became more complicated to handle everything on my own. And then when Denis came back and Joe came back, they were very enthusiastic about the work, but there were still things to be fixed. So then the long hours and long weeks started off, and I think we wrapped it up 2-3 weeks in all of finaling, but between 12 and 20-hour days, 7 days a week. And then we had a small break after the first pass of the final mixing, because VFX were not quite finished yet. So we had a few weeks break, and then we came back for 2-3 days after, just to fine-tune everything.
All with the VFX.
All with the final VFX.
The ink.
the inks, all little things, but allowed us to give a second polishing pass over everything. And
I think we did roughly 45 days.
If we, not calendar-wise, but if we put like hours,
together.
Hours, dividing it in 8-hour days, maybe the equivalent of 45.
I think we can say that, but one night we had a screening with all the producers from LA, and we were like late. We had so many different problems, mixing for different reasons. It was a new console. We can't think we can.
Well,
say.
yeah,
it was a new console in the studio.
S6. Yeah.
So it was, and Bernard did a fantastic work to get used to the board, but of course it's not easy in a click. So there's always problem. And we had the screening. It was at 10 a.m. in the morning, and I think Bernard and I Bernard stayed I think until 5 a.m. and I stayed until like 3 a.m. maybe that night, and it was like.
I had a fader that stopped working, and that was kind of bugging for me because randomly it's always the sound you need that's on that fader. So at one point it was like 4 a.m. and I thought, okay, well that thing is supposed to be plug and play. So all those different modules of the S6. So I just unplugged the fader module, took another one that was freed up on the other console, plugged it in. And of course, it was not that simple. So instead of losing one fader, I lost 8 fader because when I tried to plug the other one back, it didn't work anymore. So I had this hole of 8 faders in front of me that was, and then all the fixes the next days with all producers, I had to skip over 8 faders and trying to keep. It's like having a huge rock in the shoe.
It's okay. You look really busy. He's banking away.
with 2 hours.
I think he had 1,000 track like that. It was fascinating. I never saw that before. 1,000 track in how many faders?
Well, 32 I had, but that's the beauty. Yeah, that's the beauty of what Pro Tools has become. But it evolved in a way that with the S6 and the way Pro Tools is evolving, you can now have as much, almost, it's almost seamless to have many tracks available and on separate workstations, and you almost don't know on which workstation you're working on, since it's all merging up together there, and it's a really powerful tool now, and it felt easy to handle as much track. And this is not counting also many pre-dubs that were inactive that I use commit as a way to be able to fold down pre-dubs and have those tracks disappear from the load of the system, and then easily being able to bring it back in and do fixes in those pre-dubs. And no, it was technologically it was great.
I feel like with some mixed teams or teams of people who work at this end, there's like the people who don't want to change, and then there's somebody in the team who's like, no, we should start thinking about it this way, or you should start using this plugin or whatever. Yeah. And then you sound like you're more of a mixer who's like, I'm comfortable changing things, I'm comfortable.
Yes. But with a purpose.
It needs.
My approach is you have to know everything that comes out. And if somebody says, "Oh, this tool is amazing," okay, well, I'm gonna try it out and use it. But never forget the out goal of it, and because it's so easy to get lost into the techno geeky things of how things are evolving and just simply how a plugin looks, it influences people in thinking, oh, wow, this sounds great. Does it really? What does it do different? And there's so many like demos on YouTube that people are referring to, and you're looking at it, and the thing is actually not working. And it's so hard to decipher what's actually actual benefits compared to what's just gimmicky marketing stuff around. So I'm really trying to be as critic as possible, but keep an open-minded in things and never forget why things were made in a way. I'm actually working on an ongoing project of restoring old films now, and of course they're mostly all mono films, but it's really a good learning process into what's necessary to get a story out. And when you see how efficiently things can be done using one channel, with crappy sound, but emotionally, story-wise, things are coming through super great, then it brings all those things in perspective. And really, do you actually need that tool to make your story go through? And keeping a perspective on how things were done, and how you mentioned the conversation, and boy, did they not have the same tools as we have today, and it's still regarded as a great sounding film.
You have to be original, and that means you have to go and take the sound specifically on the field and not trying to pass through different plugs, because at the end of the day, everything sounds the same. We had a conversation, Bernard and I, about speakerphone, which is a fantastic plugs for a lot of device communication that everybody uses. And one day I remember coming here, and I discovered the tool, and it was like exciting and everything, and using it, and Bernard said, I hate it. It's all sound the same. And I said, no, it's good. It's going to be a conversation. And Bernard said, I'm going to create myself. He's right, We have to go back to those things, If you listen to Apocalypse Now, the first scene when Martin Sheen is in his hotel room, and you see the famous blade over his head, the sound of that blade, my goodness, it's so unique because it's coming back from the sources. And we tried to did that on Arrival to make it everything, organic and different. And at the end of the day, of course you transform the sound. But you need a very good sources. We have to be very careful with plugs. In a way, plugs have to be used as a sound as itself. I think we have to go into the plug and move it and everything and shake it. Mark Mangini, this is exactly how he works in Los Angeles. I had the chance to spend a few hours with him in his studio while he was doing Blade Runner. And Mark is he just mixed the plugs. He take a plugs, do another plugs, another plugs, another plugs. At the end of the day, he doesn't remember what he's doing. He's everything is completely overwhelmed and mixing and everything. But that thing, if you want to try to have a unique thing, you really have to work it out and make it, at the end of the day, everything sounds the same. Everything, that's why, a lot of people work like that, but it's one of the challenge, I think.
I had a film that was playing in the 60s, and I had our old engineer that was here for 40 years in this building for a long time, and I had him build an AM radio with a wire as an antenna, and I used that as a plug-in. And it was incredible because I could detune, retune, and the way the wire was bringing closer or further away, it gave a sound that no plugin can have, and it's the best way for me to have a unique sound and not reuse something every time is to get a completely new tool that actually close to the real thing. And for a film, there was a band playing on the next floor on top, so we had this broken subwoofer that was still playing, but had cracks in it. I just put the bass track in it and just put some glasses and wood piece on top of it, recorded those things vibrating, and they would each vibrate at a different frequency. And you just put that now in the room after with the band playing on top, so you really feel like the frame is vibrating at this frequency and the rest of it is at that frequency, and it creates harmonics in a way that it's impossible to recreate. And well, the lo-fi plugin will just not recreate that. And it's something I'm when I listen to things and I see, oh well, that's just noticing the lo-fi plugin in soundtracks is now becoming, there are some great tools. It can be used very well, and I'm using a lot of them. And but you just have to find, the beyond the plugin. What is the sound of it, and how is it really the best sound you can have? Is it the best way you can produce sound for specific things and find the right tool for it.
Yeah, I like the idea in your process too of like, I don't know, I find like when you're working at a workstation and you're in your plugins, like you can almost feel your brain congealing. And the idea of getting up and building it, or like you're talking about when you were miking the suits and stuff, or playing the sounds in Arrival, the comm sounds through different speakers and stuff like that. Like getting up out of your chair, doing stuff, being active, it kind of wakes you up in a way.
Going back to sound, going back to sound and away from processing at some point.
And the visual aspect of looking at the screen all the time, I find it's like
and
really
going back
narrows you.
to microphones, because if the way you record your thing, it's changed so much. Like it's fantastic how you can do something with when you just record that's going to be so difficult to do so. And even in mixing room, there is some way to bring your microphone in a certain level, at a certain position, certain angle, certain things. And it's so tough to recreate that because you can have a unique thing. And it's fantastic. It's like put the mic, under this couch and make sound on the couch. You might have something that will happen that, oh my goodness.
You have to get out of the box at some point. I mean, the box is, I wouldn't think of mixing in any other way, but never forget the real life and real things, and always play with sound, because otherwise you're going to lock yourself into something that you're not noticing, but you're getting locked into some sonic signature that is hard to get out of.
Because there is no limit with sound, because there is no structure. Like in music, in a way, there is a structure in music, Occidental music I will talk about. But with sound, as itself, with sound design and so with sound mixing at the end, you can produce things that there is no limit. And it's fascinating for that. I really like this field where there's a lot of anarchy in a way,
I just want to kind of pause this talk for a second to just mention how great it is to hear you guys talk about sound with such passion. It's really cool to hear, because not only were you guys working on this film that ended up being creme de la creme, top-notch, award-winning stuff, but you guys seem to be having fun along the way as well.
But we're having fun also together. So yeah. we did and we have to say that during Arrival, we were really connected also with conversation a lot of time. Bernard was so helpful, because Bernard is fantastic for one thing.
Just one thing, right? One thing.
Just one thing. He can drive a car perfectly, but also he can be the mechanician in the engineer.
Oh, you can the pilot and
the mechanician.
Yeah, and the engineer.
The engineer. And he's really that. I think he probably can be the best technician you can get and the best recording mixer you can get. It's really tough to beat on that. Usually, there's one or the other. Which is normal, So it's at the end of the day, how can you combine technology and art? This is the main goal when we do that. And with a lot of today with computers, we're totally in it, like we've never been before. How can you be a good geek and a good artist? Because there's something sometimes that doesn't connect.
I was listening to your interview with Mark Mangini, and the way he said that sound technician was something that was hurtful for him to hear, and it's true in a way. But we have to be geeks at some point, but we have to be artists using it, because otherwise, if you're only technical, like you said earlier. And Sylvain is an artist in itself, sound-wise. He's got an imagination and a feel for what can create sound and what can be pulled out of sounds that impresses me every time. The way he comes up with sounds I would never have thought of, and it always gives an interesting signature. And during Arrival, I have this image when we were recording all those devices with ADR lines. And the session was going at an end, we were finishing it. And he stayed in the booth, and the Pro Tools was recording, and he was just playing with stuff. And we were, at first, it started off by trying to give breaths into microphone, which is something you never have when you ADR people for devices like that. So he was recording all sorts of things. Then he just stayed there and started playing with the tools, detuning stuff, create feedbacks and all. And we were all chatting in the other room, and I was looking at him. He's alone in his in his bubble there, but he created some amazing sound that are in the film that are absolutely fantastic, almost off-worldy sound, but based exactly. He was using those communication tools. So then you have a sonic signature that you're hearing throughout the film because it's part of a communication that we're using, but there are sounds that have absolutely no purpose, but they're weird. And this is just playing and toying and being creative and imaginative with sounds. And Sylvain is always coming up with incredible stuff.
$100. You have to do even if people will start to laugh in the mixing room about what you try to do, even if directors will look at you and say, oh my goodness, this is not right at all. I prefer to have somebody who say you're totally wrong than somebody who say nothing, because if you're wrong because you bring something, you have to come back, it's complicated sometimes on a kind of psychological level, but you have to try things. You have to try, even on a very regular film. You never know what will happen. Sound is a perfect world for going to open doors that the image can do, I think.
One thing that I would love, and I don't think it's possible, but an incredible thing that I would love to hear at one point is like a scene of a film and taking 10 sound crews, different sound crews, and creating sounds for everyone. And then we all have this party where we listen to this 10-minute clip with all our different views, with all our different backgrounds and cultures, and you take from 10 crews from around the world and create that. And then, I mean, we could talk around that and for days, I'm sure. And that's the power of it. It's the same scene. It's just different views, different backgrounds, different cultures, and that would be so amazing.
Well, let's figure it out. Let's make it happen.
Make it happen.
Guys, I just want to say thank you very much for sitting down with Teresa and I today and giving us a tour of this great facility and letting us sit in this amazing mix room while we have this talk. I really appreciate you guys making the time for us, and hopefully we can do it again someday.
Thank you for your interest.
Thank you for your interest. Yeah.
And flying all the way to Montreal.
Thanks to Tim and Teresa for going to Montreal, conducting the interview. It's awesome. Thanks to Stacey Dupas for letting us bend and twist her voice on our bumpers. You can follow the show at the Tonebenders and go to tonebenderspodcast.com to leave a comment. Big thanks to Nathan Moody, a.k.a. Noise Jockey. Nathan did the primary edit of the interview on this one. Nathan's a sound designer, musician, and mastering engineer from Northern California. He's been a recording musician since 1997. He's run his Noise Jockey blog since 2008 and has spent the last 10 years creating sound design for interactive installations. You can check out his sound design and audio editing work at noisejockey.net and his music at nathanmoody.bandcamp.com. And Nathan's also a buddy of mine.
Yeah, Nathan's a great guy. It's kind of weird because he's someone that I've always wanted to have as a guest on the show, and now he's helping us out with it, which is kind of a cool twist.
I will get him on here eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for listening to Tonebenders. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. If you listen on iTunes or Stitcher, please write us a review while you're there. To support the show, go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click through our Amazon link or leave us a tip. You can also download and listen to our entire show archive there, and leave a comment on our site or on SoundCloud. Keep up to date by following at the Tonebenders on Twitter, or find Tonebenders Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Email us with your questions and ideas at info@tonebenderspodcast.com.